This episode is brought to you by the Pelora Group.
Welcome back to Winning Through Culture.
I'm Tim Flanagan.
And I'm Amanda Kramer.
When culture's not a priority, people aren't a priority. Having an intentional focus helps you as a leader remain impactful and relevant as you move your business forward.
Welcome to Winning Through Culture.
It is great to be with everybody on another episode of Winning Through Culture. We are here today with our special guest, Lynne Hughes. Welcome to the podcast, Lynne.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. So we're going to dive into the topic today of nurturing stewardship and community in a business culture. But before I do that, I really want to spend a moment to introduce you because I think you and your work are really remarkable. I'll get to know you earlier this year in 2024. And just so background for our listeners, Lynne is a nationally recognized grief expert and has worked with adults, children, and teens in coping with loss and life transitions. She is the founder and CEO of Comfort Zone Camp, which is a national nonprofit based in Richmond, Virginia. And you all offer free weekend bereavement camps to children who have experienced the death of either a parent, a sibling, or a primary caregiver. Since you started this wonderful ministry in 1999, you have now helped over 24,000 grieving children, which is just remarkable. Lynne, I know you've been profiled in much bigger media publications than our wonderful podcast here, whether that is the Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, Parade, People Magazine, and Parents Magazine. You've been on TV with the Today Show, CBS News, and other news channels, NPR, and you've been a contributor to the Huffington Post, as well as an author of You Are Not Alone, Teens Talk About Life After the Loss of a Loved One, which was published in 2005. So, you've achieved many accomplishments, and I am certain from getting to know you that your greatest accomplishment is catching a vision that you have shared with so many people and making that a reality. And many, many organizations have recognized you as either Businesswoman of the Year or in other leadership roles. And you've also spoken in front of 10,000 people at the $1 Million Roundtable's annual convention, which is a big deal and a big convention for insurance and financial planners from around the world. So welcome and thank you so much for your time today.
Glad to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here. And again, great to get to know your ministry and be able to do some support of that. So we can dive into this whole concept of stewardship. Amanda and I are looking forward to this conversation.
So as Tim shared, we've had the pleasure of getting to know you over the course of this year and the work that you've done. And I know Tim and I know your story and how you really crafted what ended up being Comfort Zone Camp, and the work that it does is so invaluable to those in the grief space. So maybe you can just share a little bit about how it came to be, and then we'll talk a little bit about how that stewardship element has expanded since you launched Comfort Zone Camp.
Sure. So I grew up in Michigan and I was having an ordinary life. And when I was 9 years old, my parents were playing tennis and my mom pulled a muscle in her leg and died 3 days later in her sleep from a blood clot. So fluky, weird. And then my father, 2.5 years later, had a massive heart attack and died, which, one loss, let alone two losses, almost never happens to a child, but it happened to me. And there weren't resources and you were doing really well if you acted like it didn't happen to you and put on that mask and tried to blend in. But on the inside, it was very isolating and it separated me from other kids. I went to summer camp after my parents died, just a regular camp, and I loved it. And it allowed me to step outside of my loss and get back to being a kid again in that bubble of camp. So fast forward to, I'm in college and I always had this feeling we all struggle with the why of adversity. And me, even as a 9-year-old girl, a 12-year-old girl, why did this happen to me was that I was supposed to use my life in some way to make a difference. I had no idea what this meant. So fast forward to I'm in college. What major is use your life to make a difference? Of course, there is not one. So I picked communications because I didn't have to take any math, but I still felt this pressure. Yes, true. That I was supposed to, do something. And so the only thing I did know for sure I wanted to do in college was to be a camp counselor like I had when I was a kid. So I went to a camp in the Poconos. I thought getting out of the state would be interesting. It was the only co-ed camp in the area. Thought that was interesting. And then fast forward to, yes, I met my husband, who was also a camp counselor at that summer camp. And he was from Virginia. And we loved kids and the whole summer camp experience. So after I graduated, I moved down to Virginia had a variety of jobs, and I still kept feeling this pressure. I'm supposed to use my life to make a difference. And one day I was having a conversation about that there weren't any resources for grieving kids. And Kelly was saying, oh, is there any way we could go back and be camp counselors or go back to camp as adults and kind of combine an unmet need in society with all these many years later, there still weren't any resources for grieving kids with our love of summer camp. And that's how Comfort Zone Camp came about being.
Well, and it's truly rooted in service and compassion, right? You had two very traumatizing experiences as a young child and realizing that there was a gap in the world to service the needs of those grieving children. And I think that one of the things also from a communication standpoint, picking that as a major so you didn't have to do math, that resonates from a standpoint of, looking at what is difficult and what is easy and having the opportunity to step into a space that really truly meets someone in the most difficult times of their lives. It's just really important. And ultimately, the stewardship element of that is that you stepped into being a leader in that space. And so when we talk about individuals who are listening to this podcast, they are leaders from a small business perspective, they're entrepreneurs, all walks of life. And ultimately, they're stepping into that leadership space too, and having the opportunity to root themselves in service, whether that be on the nonprofit side or whether that be on the for-profit side. There's an element of making sure that stewardship is part of the daily work that is being done, no matter the type of business in which you're in. So doing more than just business, I would say. So I think when we think about stewardship, what comes to mind for you when you think about what stewardship means? How do you define it, both for Comfort Zone Camps, for you personally, and then for those that you are able to impact through the work that Comfort Zone Camp does?
Sure. So from a business perspective, stewardship from a nonprofit, we have many stakeholders. So it is being good stewards of, which is really how do we care for our people and how do we care for our product and for those who use it. And so, I always say we've got to take care of our campers, in our case, our volunteers, because we're very, very volunteer reliant, our donors, and make sure that they know and are connected to our why. And then the community at large, and make sure that there's an understanding of why we do what we do and why it matters. So, it's being good stewards, people care. How are we caring for our staff? How are we caring for the camper families? How are we caring for volunteers? How are we caring for donors? Are we spending our money prudently? But just, are we showing care in the things that we do and how we treat others? And I truly believe if you do the people care why, then the success follows. And personally, I just truly believe, even though I've had some tough things happen to me, I've had a great life. And it is a privilege to walk this earth. And I believe we're all obligated to leave this earth better than we found it. And so how are we going to do that? And I'm getting goosebumps even telling you that. So my big thing, and I was telling my kids this even when they were little and like, what are you talking about? But I feel like I will have done my job as a parent if my kids embody that. If they leave the world, like certainly we want them to have a job and be productive citizens, but they need to do more than that. And if they cure cancer, great. But if they don't cure cancer, we all every day in how we interact with people and treat them or find our ways to serve. Again, how can we leave this world a better place? Because we had this opportunity to work this. So I feel like that because it's so in my DNA, not only as a parent, but that is also how I lead and interact with all those stakeholders with Comfort Zone.
Yeah.
Lynne, you've done a great job of being a living example of stewardship with, to your point, taking the adversity that may have destroyed so many people earlier in their life and turning this into just an amazing body of work, serving so many families and children. As I was listening to your story, what are some of the key things you think you take out of your experience that a business could incorporate in their culture to kind of create a community sense and a give back sense?
Yeah, I think it's really important to know what your true north is. So, whether it's your corporate values or call it your why, and if you went away, who would be impacted? So for us, our why is, we want to help grieving children have a voice and a place and a community that supports them. So everything we do, they're our priority. So we don't want to have mission creep. We don't want to chase the dollar. We want to make sure that our why, if we're adding a new product or service or adding a new camp in a different location, or we're taking on a corporate partner or whatever that is supporting grieving kids, and we're not getting sidetracked in the meantime. So I think it's really important to know our why and to make sure when we're hiring people that they know our why, that, again, that we are mission based and we want people who are passionate and care. This is not a place you clock into and clock out of. If you're looking at your watch at 5:00, we're probably not a fit for you. And there's kind of an owner's mentality, even though we're a nonprofit and I'm the founder. But really, if people do have that owner's mentality, if they're passionate about it and care, they're going to go the extra mile. They're going to make that extra phone call. They're going to hold that camper parent's hand. They're going to spend time with the donor to make them feel good. So it's going that extra mile in care. But I think if people really are passionate and know the why it matters, and then giving them the impact of sharing, like when we get testimonials and feedbacks, we send them out. We send them out internally. We send them out on volunteers. We put them on social media. We put it in our newsletter. We put it in our annual report. So, we're always trying to give a face to the why. And it's not just like a money ask or whatever, that we want people to be attached to what we do and to care and to know that there's an outcome. And then I think another thing is that I think it's really important for businesses to be able to be agile and adapt. So if, again, our product is camps, but COVID happened, and we couldn't meet in person, and there was more loss than ever during COVID. So within a month, we figured out how to bring camps on Zoom. And then, when we got back to camps, we could only rent to families. So we created family camps. Again, always because we knew that these kids needed to get back and have that voice and that place and community. So it's, right now there's more suicide loss than ever in our world. So we've created some suicide specific camps because that is a need. So are we listening to what our needs are of our constituents, of our stakeholders, and are we able to adapt? Not, mission creep, so much chasing the dollar and losing our way or every shiny penny, but are we adapting to how to best and continuously serve despite circumstances in the world?
Well, and one of the points that you mentioned, which I find interesting, right, is that you're creating a culture of care, both from the fact that it is a nonprofit, but also as a leader, as a founder of an organization. That is the guiding principle for every decision that's being made. You're taking into account those that are impacted by your why. And you do, of course, have individuals that are helping you facilitate, as you reference, your product, right? So creating those camps, being agile in the way in which that curriculum is developed, and then ultimately meeting the need of those that are attending camp. For those that are part of comfort zone specifically, and I'm going to use the word employee in this instance because relating it back to a for-profit business, having individuals that are service minded, right? Being that you're a nonprofit, I think many that would come to you and want to be part of and not clock out at 5 would want to be part of it are going to already have that. But when you think about having the balance of that employee, what are some of the focused initiatives or ways that you encourage those that are part of comfort zone camps to embody and have that stewardship element in addition to maybe their daily responsibilities? Asking it a different way, if you have an employee, no matter the type of business you have, that is, initially service minded, how are you promoting and sustaining the ability for them to continue to be good stewards? Is there anything that Comfort Zone Camps does specifically that you feel would be of benefit for those that might be listening?
I think we try to come up with ways to have them, it's not just all about camp, it's to stay engaged in other ways. So there's opportunities internally and externally. We encourage them to volunteer. We give them, comp days off if they wish to volunteer for other agencies. We have a regional advisory committee, which is kind of local people who are doing community-based initiatives, speaking to schools, teachers, trying to get more volunteers. We have committees for fundraising events. We have a committee that works specifically with our campers to connect them in between camps. And so there's different ways that are some things that are part of our mission, but different ways that they're invited to serve in these different ways. We also encourage different leadership opportunities and continuing education. We also provide leadership coaching and training for all the staff, but on a more deeper level for the senior staff. So trying to grow our people on the people side and also on the personal side.
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of go back a little bit on something that I thought you said that was very salient. I made some notes here. I'll capture this. So really the model, if you will, Lynn, that you've kind of espoused sounds like is have a clear mission, which is to serve these families and these children. Stay focused on the mission. Don't let yourself get distracted with all the shiny objects the world presents to you. Make sure the people that are a part of Comfort Zone Camp are mission focused people, not just looking for a job, but truly mission focused. Do the work, go the extra mile, share the story, the successes of the mission, which again, I think you do a wonderful job of from the time you spent with us, and then be agile and adapt to the environment, the changes, and the needs of those you serve. I think that's a beautiful template to describe why I believe your organization's been so impactful and yet something that any business can take and lift into their world. As you think about that template, what are some of the leadership lessons you've learned through your experience guiding this organization, stewarding all these resources for Comfort Zone Camp?
One that comes to mind is just in that template that you laid out is that I think it's very important for whether it's the CEO, senior leaders, that they've got to walk the talk, right? So, at camp, you will see me at camp. You will see our senior leaders at camp. You will see me bussing a table, packing a box, working registration. I mean, it's a very flat hierarchy because we're all working together to get the work done. And people seem surprised. A lot of times volunteers, they're like, oh, Lynn's here? Or,
why is she cleaning the table?
Why is she cleaning the tables? Yeah. And it's just, so I think for companies, when they become good stewards and steward leadership, that they can't just be like, oh, this is for, just entry-level employees. It's got it that if it means enough to you, and you want people to get behind it and part of their DNA and part of the cultural DNA, you've got to have your leaders show up and be hands-on and, again, walk the talk. Another big philosophy I have is that what we do is very human-led. That because it's people-led and that there's going to be mistakes are going to happen. And so, it might be a box that gets forgotten or, a name tag. So from big to small, but when mistakes happen, it's okay. And how do we get back on track with the fewest amount of people being affected? So keep that in mind of, when mistakes happen, how do we get back on track with the fewest amount of people being affected? You're going to always make good decisions. There's sometimes better decisions, but there are very few bad decisions that will be made if you have that kind of mindset. And then you move on and recover really quickly. And you just know too that, again, it's inherent in what we do. We all goof, but how do we course correct really quickly without finger pointing? My other kind of really big one is leading with heart and common sense. I don't care, if you're corporate America or if you're running a nonprofit, it's somewhere we've gotten, focused maybe on the bottom line or on the rules or, fear of being sued or whatever. But it seems like that there are so many like rules or policies in different businesses that's like, these make no sense. They're just not common sense. They're not putting people first. They're not putting for us, our campers or staff or, so again, like to really show it's okay to lead with heart and common sense. And if you do, I really feel like good things will happen and you will be able to tell your why. You will be able to connect people to care about what you do, and that which brings loyalty, which brings sustainability. So I think, heart and common sense go a long way.
Well, and just in what I've seen, I know we talked a little bit about how you do celebrate the impact of Comfort Zone and highlight those testimonials. And so that I think is very evident in the fact that you are leading with heart in that way. And no reality is that everything going to be 100% perfect. So you spoke to that. And how do you course correct with the least amount of people impacted? But ultimately celebrating the fact that we are all human and ultimately we're here to support each other and make a meaningful and impactful difference in the lives of those that Comfort Zone Camp specifically is invested in and is serving, but in the greater sense, the community, because you don't know somebody's story 100%. And then at the end of the day, the ripple effect that one act of leading with heart and common sense would have for that particular individual, because that individual is then going to go and have a relationship or have a conversation or what have you with multiple other people. And so that one act, that one interaction could set a course that is so much more positive than potentially the opposite. So I think that's I don't know, that just kind of hit me. Like that one interaction, if you're leading with heart and common sense, that ultimately you'll make a difference for that person.
The ripples from what we do, again, what you just alluded to is exactly, again,
Yeah.
We change one child's life. We change a whole camp full of lives. We've changed 25 years of, and
Yeah.
the volunteers have a profound experience and a great experience, right? They're going to tell people. If the campers have a great experience, they're going to tell people. Their families are going to be grateful. If you get donors to be able to come out to camp, or you bring camp to them in a way, and they're hearing these stories, right? And why their dollars and resources matter. And then in the community, when we're going out and we're partnering with people, and whether it's schools or teachers or physicians, pediatricians, life insurance, financial planner, I mean, if we can get those ripples and get people to care and buy in, then the sustainability and, my goal is to have this exist beyond my lifetime and for many years to come. So, it's those are all foundational building blocks that you don't realize that one ripple, one at a time, what it matters.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, so much of the work you do and your team does is really about emotional support and healing. I mean, that's the core of the work. It's very powerful because, again, there's probably in some settings of camp, there's a lot of sadness, at least at the beginning. I know the objective is to have joy and healing at the end of the camp experience and beyond that. What is that kind of living in that space taught you as a leader, and what do you think other leaders could learn from living in that space of, again, really having to create kind of an intense emotional support structure and a place of healing and transformation?
Good question. I mean, one, I feel really lucky that I get to do something that I'm passionate about every day, and passion is real and it's genuine and it's contagious. And to apply that passion to a social need, to know that we were the first 501c3 bereavement camp in the country. Now there's a lot of them, but we were the first. And we were the first in a lot of areas. So to feel like, again, that people are now, the needle has a long way. We have a kind of a grief avoidance society, but to say, we can see that we're making inroads, and we're having a third of our volunteers now are former campers coming back and being a part of it. We have former campers who are on staff now. So I think to stay in it for the long game and to, celebrate those successes and to realize, again, if you really believe what you're doing matters, it will be rewarding. And, I will say it's really easy, especially as we get to year end and like hitting numbers or wherever you come in or whatever. And, then what happens January 1st, right? The meter gets set and you usually raise the bar higher. So, we all need to take a minute to make sure we celebrate and exhale the jobs well done and the impact that we did have, and not always get in that cycle of doing more. And, when the clock resets to January 1st, that a new weight gets set upon us. So how do you celebrate with your team? How do you work hard, but play hard? That's what can lead to burnout if you don't really have those times and you're always just doing more.
So a comment you just shared really hit me, that a third of individuals come back in some way and support Comfort Zone Camp. So when you think about that, the satisfaction, the community impact, I just have to sit with that for a minute, right? That there is that level of commitment to continuing the mission and supporting the why of Comfort Zone Camp specifically. But at the same time, how do you foster that? I know you're just that good, so I'm just going to say it that way. You're just that good, but how do you foster that? How do you encourage the reinvestment of those that have experienced the impact of camp? Is there anything that y'all have focused on? And again, I know you talked about we're headed right into the season, or we are in the season of giving. Everybody's looking at year end. And oftentimes I see a larger influx of people asking me, how are we giving back as we head into the holidays? When you think about the people that reinvest in Comfort Zone, what are some of the ways in which you've seen that be as impactful as it could possibly be?
Yeah, I think the fact that we didn't touch, a lot of the kids come back over and over again, right? The Comfort Zone did become their community and safe place, and they didn't interact with us. Some of them one time, but a lot of them interacted years over years, right? So it stayed with them in a profound way. So I think that feeling and realizing that people gave up weekends of their life over and over again for them and wanting to pay it forward has really made a difference. And I think the fact that now that they're adults and maybe feel like Comfort Zone was key, that it was a key pivotal moment in their healing, of being okay and now being adults and being able to have careers or families or relationships that they wanted. So I think all of that has really mattered. We try our best to stay in touch with alumni and through the channels of social media or newsletters and text blasts and so forth, and try to maintain those connections and touches. So it is some of that, but it is a lot of them. Just sometimes people will literally be like, I came, a couple of times when I was 12 years old. And now they're like 30 years old. And you're like, and they just feel that call to give back what was given to them to pay it forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, again, the sense of mission you have inculcated in what you do is such a massive driver of incredible success in the sense of the community you serve, the children you serve, and the fact that they have a place to come to on a repetitive basis, which I was fascinated by your own story that you shared with us over the summer, is just, you're transforming what arguably be a tragedy into this beautiful thing. And I think you're transforming these children who have been through a very traumatic experience in their life, whether it's a parent, a caregiver, or a sibling, and bringing them to a place where they're called to give back. And I think that's that whole cycle of stewardship, if you will, that your organization is doing an amazing job of. Obviously, you guys have been here now 25 years, 24,000 plus children affected, and how many tens and hundreds of thousands beyond that were impacted by that ripple effect. What have you seen over this time? And you mentioned wanting to kind of see this last beyond even your lifetime, but what do you think the long-term effects of an organization staying on point like that and prioritizing that community and stewardship effect? What do you think that can be certainly in your world, but in the community you live in and the greater country as a whole? It's kind of a big question.
Yes, it is. It's both, it's grief specific, I think, and then it's modeling that anybody could do what I did. So, I like to think that in the Richmond community, which is where our headquarters is, where we started, we've become such a part of the fabric when a loss happens in a school that we are a natural partner with them, that we're top of mind to think of like, I should reach out to Comfort Zone. When there's a loss on a child's travel soccer team, that soccer coach knows to reach out to Comfort Zone for help or guidance. And I'm getting the goosebumps. And, that those kind of things happen a lot. And it's humbling, but to be a part of the fabric of that one awareness now that kids grieve and that they need resources and they need support and a place. And so, to be providing all that and to be a part of the fabric. We're in 13 states, and, in those 13 states that we're in, that we're close to that level of, that people think of when they think of grief, that again, one, it's a thing. It's real. It doesn't look like adult grief, but kids grieve and they need tools, and that then they think of Comfort Zone for that support. But I'm very humbled that other people, both who've been in Comfort Zone or people in the community, that have come to me or, looked at me as a role model mentor to start their own nonprofits and turning their own adversity into purpose, and that it's possible. So I don't know if that answers it. That was a tough one.
Yeah, no, it does. I think, again, your stewardship of kind of adhering to the mission you are called to through your own life experiences have this impact. And now you're teaching other people to take their life experience, their calling and mission to serve others as well in whatever that passion of theirs is, or whatever that mission purpose that they have been called to. And you're sprinkling those seeds and cultivating other, in your case, nonprofits and organizations that are serving in different ways, and in some ways maybe cross-serving, the same community you have. But yeah, it's a real multiplier effect. It's not like 1 + 1 = 2. This is 2 times 2 to the square root of 64 which I'm terrible with math too, Lynn.
I was going to say, we're all living back into math.
Yeah, we're going to expose some math skills here. I understand multiplication really well, and I think you've done an amazing job of multiplying the gifts you've been given and resources that you've had the opportunity to steward.
Yeah. Well, and speaking to that, right, being that multiplier, having that effect, oftentimes, Tim or I will get asked in just conversations or just networking in general, how we find organizations that we want to partner with, how we found you, right? And so it is part of our network, right? You were shared, Comfort Zone Camps was shared with us by someone that's physically within our own firm that had personally volunteered, and then you and I had a connection, and then I was like, I need you to come and speak, and like it just multiplied, it ballooned very quickly. What advice would you give to nonprofit leaders or business leaders on either side, really, about how to find organizations, whether it be in the grief space? I know that's specifically what we're talking about with Comfort Zone, but just ways to partner effectively with that stewardship element, the organizations in the community that are doing good work on multiple fronts. Do you have any advice for people about how to make those connections, where to look? I know oftentimes we'll get asked that, like, how do we find the organizations that we partner with? I think that is something that people sometimes will struggle with if they want to support in multiple areas.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, there's a couple formal ways. There's an organization called guidestar.org that you can search by the field or like an organization specific and look, at their facts and figures, how they're doing. And I think it's good to ask employees, right? Employees like to be included. And there might be a nonprofit that makes sense in a certain area with your business or that you have a personal heart to, and then explore that. I think, but asking your employees, who are they passionate about and why? Are there service, opportunities? Do you want to go deep or wide is a question too. That there's some corporations, right, that sprinkle a lot of money to a lot of different places. Sometimes it's in a lot of different fields. Sometimes it's like, let's say in the field of grieving children, or they're all in on one specific organization because they really want to go deep. Of course, being on the other side, it's great for us when we have the long-term partners and that you can go deep and then you can see the impact is easier to measure and there's hands-on opportunities and you really do become like partner families. So they are there. But I think really, again, I think GuideStar employees are just word of mouth, and usually the good nonprofits bubble up. There's local magazines like that do like the top nonprofits and they rank them annually or things like that. That could be a resource as well for your local community.
Well, and then that had me kind of spiral a different question. As a nonprofit leader, founder, what do you look for in a business when you talk about like maybe that longer term relationship? What are you looking for? So the listeners of this podcast, right, are entrepreneurs, small business owners, leaders in some capacity. I wonder what we kind of know on that side, what we're hoping to engage or to get out of a nonprofit relationship. But what on the other side is the nonprofit? What are you looking for in a potential partner?
You can see when it resonates, when the lights go, when our mission resonates with people, right? So you are looking for that. Somebody's not just a box checker, that they're like, oh, aha, like I get this. I had lost myself, or I had a personal experience, or I get how if this didn't exist, how it could be impactful. So that when there's that aha and they get excited about it, but that they want to get hands on, that's certainly, the corporate donations are amazing. Sometimes corporations, they'll have like too many strings. Like you have to do this camp for this audience in this zip code. So things that you might not be able to deliver because they've gotten like too much involved, or they're trying to alter or change like what you do.
Yeah.
Take you off mission.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're getting like, wait a minute, I didn't want to serve that zip code that one day on that, you're like, wait a minute. So, but like ones that want to show up and get hands on and learn about you, whether they're coming to camp and volunteering, they're promoting it in their newsletters, or they're letting you come and speak to their place of business to get people excited to know, again, the why it means something to you. And so that they can get behind it and that they participate. And like we had one partner that employees nominate a nonprofit and the employees pick, and then they do their own fundraiser. We have a 5K. They all do their own like 5K team. It's like mandated for them all to basically participate in the 5K.
You must run if you work here.
But they make it into kind of like a party fun atmosphere. And, so the ones who really like get all in are the ones that we are looking for. And we love them.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Well, any kind of closing thoughts on this topic of stewardship, Lynne, as you think about businesses that are not maybe necessarily weighted into this, or individuals that are trying to find ways to give back more?
I think that if you are truly serious about servant leadership and steward leadership, find one that you can get behind, that from top down, it's so important. And then explain the why and make sure that it resonates and that people can get excited behind it. Because I think the rewards are so many. You can improve a community, it can improve a population, your employee loyalty, your customer loyalty. There's so much good that comes out of it, but I think it needs to come from a sincere and authentic place of why it matters. And then to be seen, again, that the CEO to the managers on down, that everybody is finding a way to visibly support it and walk the talk. And then I think, again, the rewards are really endless.
Lead with heart and walk the talk.
You're speaking my love language.
I paid attention today and when I saw you over the summer.
Certainly.
Well, this has been really insightful for those that don't know Lynne. Now you know a little bit more about Lynne and her story. We will have a link to Comfort Zone Camp in our show notes. I would encourage people to check out Lynne and her organization, the good work they're doing. Again, I think there's a great opportunity for those that want to volunteer and serve the community you're serving. And I know they can get in touch with your organization through your website. We are blessed to be a part of your world and ministry. And thank you so much for your time today, Lynne.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Winning Through Culture.
Until next time, stay intentional, be impactful,
because your culture matters.